The great crystal dome of the galactic nexus sparkled with light from 1,000 different stars. Inside the massive building, the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered for their monthly meeting. The air buzzed with the sound of different languages being translated by advanced computers. High Commander Zelthrus stood tall at his speaking platform. His gray skin looked like stone, and his red eyes glowed as he spoke to the crowd. He ruled the Vorthak Empire, which controlled hundreds of star systems in the outer parts of the galaxy. His people were warriors who had conquered many worlds through strength and fear. Across the room, Prime Architect Morvain floated in a bubble of blue energy. Her body was made of living crystal that changed colors as she thought. She spoke for the Kolari, a race of beings who had mastered technology beyond what most species could understand. They controlled the trade routes between star systems and made huge profits from their advanced machines. Near the center of the room sat Queen Voice Kythera, who looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in many directions at once. She was the voice of the Hive Collective, a group mind that controlled billions of creatures across dozens of worlds. When she spoke for all of them at once. These 3 great powers had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They sometimes fought small wars with each other, but they never let their conflicts grow too big. War was bad for business, and all 3 groups made too much money from the current system to want real change. The meeting seemed normal at first. They talked about trade agreements, border disputes, and mining rights on distant planets. Then, something unexpected happened. A young Quillari named Technician Viridian asked to speak to the council. Viridian was nervous as she floated up to the speaking area. Her crystal body flickered with worried colors as she began to talk. She had been working on a deep space monitoring station when her equipment picked up strange signals from a star system called Sol. "The signals are coming from the 3rd planet, in that system," she said. Her voice was high and musical like wind chimes in a breeze. "The planet appears to be mostly water with some landmasses, but the signals suggest there is intelligent life there." The council members looked at each other with amusement. High Commander Zelthrus made a sound like rocks grinding together, which was how his people laughed. "What kind of signals?" asked Prime Architect Morvain. Viridian's body turned a deeper blue color, which meant she was concentrating hard. Mathematical sequences, artistic broadcasts, and what appear to be communications from a species that calls itself human. The word human caused an immediate reaction in the Great Hall. Hundreds of different aliens began talking at once, their voices creating a loud buzz of conversation. Many of them were laughing, but some looked confused or worried. High Commander Zelthrus raised one of his massive arms for silence. "Humans are myths," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "They are stories we tell our children, old tales about creatures who once traveled between the stars before they disappeared into legend." Prime Architect Morvain agreed with him. Her crystal body glowed brighter as she accessed her people's vast computer networks. "Our historical records show no evidence of any real species called humans. These signals must be cosmic interference or equipment malfunction." But Queen Voice Kythera remained quiet. Deep inside the shared mind of the Hive Collective, ancient memories stirred. These were old memories passed down through thousands of generations of her people. They spoke of beings from a small blue world who had once challenged the natural order of things. The memories were vague and unclear, like dreams half remembered after waking. They told stories of creatures who fought differently than other species. Where most beings would retreat when faced with superior force, these humans would adapt and find new ways to fight. They turned their weaknesses into strengths and made weapons from ordinary tools. But even Queen Voice Kythera dismissed these memories as primitive fears left over from her species' early evolution. Surely no single world could threaten civilizations that had conquered thousands of star systems. Other council members began to share their own stories about humans. The Drekmari told tales of ghost ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The Kolothi spoke of ancient ruins on distant worlds that contained strange symbols and writing that no one could understand. All of these stories had one thing in common. They were treated as entertainment, not history. Humans had become the stuff of campfire stories and children's books. They were the monsters under the bed, the mysterious strangers in old folk tales. Even if humans were real, said High Commander Zelthris, what could one primitive world do against our combined fleets? We have weapons that can destroy entire planets. We have shields that can stop any attack. We have conquered species far more advanced than any mythical humans could possibly be. The other council members nodded in agreement. Prime Architect Morvain calculated the odds of a single world threatening their galactic empires and found them to be essentially zero. Queen Voice Kithara consulted the collective wisdom of billions of minds and found the same result. Technician Viridian tried to argue for more investigation. But the signals are getting stronger, she said, and they show signs of advanced technology. Their fusion drives appear to be more efficient than ours, and their computer systems are using mathematical principles we don't fully understand. Her words fell on deaf ears. The council had already made up their minds. One of the minor representatives, a slug-like creature from the Mollusk Federation, suggested that they send a small fleet to investigate. His suggestion was quickly voted down. We have more important things to worry about than chasing ghost stories, said High Commander Zelthris. The Andromedans are building new battle stations near our border. The crystal miners on Vega 7 are threatening to strike. We don't have time to waste on fairy tales. The vote was unanimous. The Sol system would be ignored. No investigation would be launched. No contact would be attempted. The council ordered all monitoring stations to stop reporting signals from that region of space. As the meeting ended and the representatives began to leave, Queen Voice Kithara felt a strange sensation she had never experienced before. For just a moment, the collective mind of her species felt uncertain. It was as if billions of voices were whispering a warning she couldn't quite hear. But she pushed the feeling aside. After all, what threat could a single primitive world pose to civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years? High above the galactic nexus, the stars continued to shine. And somewhere among those distant points of light, in a small solar system that the great powers had chosen to ignore, something was stirring. Something that would soon remind the galaxy why some myths refused to stay buried. Captain Dae-Hyun Kim looked out at the stars through the main window of his ship. The UES Indomitable was the pride of the Terran fleet, a sleek vessel built for long journeys through deep space. Around him, 11 other human ships moved in, perfect formation as they traveled toward their first meeting with alien life. Dae-Hyun had dreamed of this moment since he was a child. Humanity had finally developed the technology to travel between the stars, and he was leading their first expedition beyond the solar system. His crew was the best Earth had to offer, each person chosen for their skills and bravery. Chief Navigator Yunbi Park sat at her station, studying star charts and plotting their course through unknown space. She was one of the smartest people Dae-Hyun had ever met, able to calculate complex routes through her head while others needed powerful computers. Her short black hair was always perfectly neat even after long shifts on the bridge. We're approaching the target system, she reported. All ships are maintaining formation and running at optimal efficiency. Chief Engineer Taemin Yu's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. Fusion drives are performing better than expected, Captain. We're actually ahead of schedule. Taemin had spent years designing the engines that made this journey possible. He was young for such an important position, but his innovative ideas had revolutionized human space travel. His engines could push the ships faster and farther than anyone had thought possible. Dr. So Young-han worked at her station near the back of the bridge, surrounded by screens showing alien communications. She was the fleet's expert on other species and had been listening to alien radio signals for months. Her translation programs had finally figured out the basic structure of what seemed to be a galactic common language. I'm picking up more transmissions, she said, adjusting her equipment. It looks like there's a patrol of alien ships in this area. Based on their communications, I think they call themselves the Vorthok. Dae-Hyun felt his heart beat faster. This was it. First contact with an alien species. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, always imagining it would be peaceful and historic. He would speak the first words between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Open a communication channel, he ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves to our new neighbors." The main screen flickered and showed the image of an alien ship. It was dark and angular, covered in what looked like weapon systems. The design was clearly meant to intimidate, with sharp edges and glowing red lights that pulsed like angry eyes. "Attention, alien vessel," Dae-hyun said, reading from the script his diplomatic team had prepared. "This is Captain Dae-hyun Kim of the United Earthship Indomitable. We come in peace, seeking friendship and understanding between our peoples." The response came quickly, but it was not what they had hoped for. The alien ship's weapons powered up, casting a red glow across space. Other Vorthak ships appeared from behind asteroids surrounding the human fleet. "Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Vorthak space," came the translated reply. The voice was deep and harsh, like rocks grinding together. "Your technology matches no known species. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Dr. So-Young-han worked frantically at her station. "Captain, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let me try to explain who we are." But there was no time for explanations. The alien commander, Sub-Admiral Crexus, had already made his decision. He assumed the humans were pirates using stolen technology, a common problem in this part of the galaxy. His orders were simple: destroy all unauthorized ships. The Vorthak vessels opened fire without warning. Bright beams of energy lanced through space, striking the human escort ship Resilience. The ship's hull cracked and glowed red-hot where the alien weapons hit it. "Evasive maneuvers!" shouted Dae-hyun. "All ships, this is not a drill!" What happened next surprised both sides. The human ships did not run away as the Vorthak expected. Instead, they began to fight back with a creativity that seemed impossible. Yoon-B Park's fingers flew over her controls, calculating impossible flight paths that used the gravity of nearby asteroids to help the ships move faster. She made the human vessels dance through space like leaves in the wind, dodging enemy fire while getting closer to their attackers. "Taemin, I need more power to the engines," she called out. "You've got it," came his reply from the engine room. Taemin began pushing the ship's systems beyond their safe limits, rerouting power in ways that should have been dangerous. But somehow he made it work. The humans fought unlike any species the Vorthak had ever encountered. Where other aliens used standard battle tactics, the humans treated the fight like a puzzle to be solved. They adapted their strategy in real time, learning from each enemy attack and finding ways to counter it. Captain Dae-hyun watched his crew work with pride and determination. They had trained for exploration, not warfare, but they were proving that humans could adapt to any situation. When their scientific equipment wasn't enough, they found ways to turn it into weapons. Dr. So-Young-han reprogrammed their communication arrays to jam enemy signals. The ship's medical scanners were modified to track enemy vessels through asteroid fields. Even the food processors were converted to create materials for emergency repairs. The battle turned when the damaged Resilience, its hull breached and engines failing, made a desperate choice. Its captain aimed the dying ship directly at the Vorthak flagship and pushed the engines to maximum power. Sub-Admiral Crexus watched in horror as the human ship crashed into his vessel. The impact tore through both ships' hulls, sending debris spinning through space. He barely escaped in a rescue pod, his flagship destroyed by an enemy that refused to give up. As his pod drifted away from the wreckage, Crexus sent a frantic message to Vorthak Command. "They fight like demons. They don't retreat. They don't surrender. They adapt and overcome. Send reinforcements immediately." Back on the Indomitable, Captain Dae-hyun surveyed the damage to his fleet. They had won their first battle, but at a terrible cost. The Resilience was gone along with her brave crew. Several other ships had suffered serious damage. "Captain," said Yoon-B Park quietly, "what do we do now? They'll probably send more ships after us." Dae-hyun looked out at the stars again, but now they seemed different. The galaxy was not the peaceful place he had hoped to find. Instead, it was controlled by empires that shot first and asked questions later. "We adapt," he said finally. "If they want to treat us as enemies, then we'll show them what humans can do when we're fighting for our survival." He turned to address his crew and the other ships in his fleet. "All vessels, this is Captain Kim. Today we learned that the galaxy is not ready to welcome us as friends. But we also learned something else. We learned that humans can fight and win against impossible odds. The crew listened with grim determination as their captain continued. We're going home to warn Earth and prepare for what's coming. But we're also going to show the galaxy that humanity will not be intimidated or destroyed. We've survived and thrived on one world for thousands of years. Now it's time to show the stars what we're made of. As the human fleet limped away from the battle, Sight Sub-Admiral Crexus's warning message raced ahead of them at the speed of light. Soon every major power in the galaxy would know that the mythical humans were real, and they were nothing like the fairy tale creatures from old stories. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency meeting was called within hours of receiving Sub-Admiral Crexus's desperate message. In the Vorthak Military Command Center on their homeworld of Thrakis, Fleet Admiral Gorthak stood before a massive display screen showing the battle. Recordings. His red eyes glowed with anger and confusion as he watched the impossible footage. "Play it again," he growled to his aide. The holographic display showed the human ships moving in ways that defied everything the Vorthak knew about space combat. The aliens watched as the human vessels used gravity wells and asteroid fields like tools, turning the environment itself into a weapon. Most shocking of all was the final moment when the damaged human ship deliberately crashed into Crexus's flagship. "No species fights like this," muttered Commander Vexus, Gorthak's second-in-command. They treated their first space battle like a learning experience. They adapted their tactics while under fire. On the crystal world of Quellara, strategic analyst Zephyrus ran the same battle data through her people's most advanced computers. The results made no sense according to traditional military analysis. The human ships were clearly inferior in firepower and defensive capabilities, yet they had achieved victory through applications of basic physics that the Quillari had somehow overlooked. Their fusion drives produce more thrust than should be mathematically possible, she reported to Prime Architect Morvain. And their targeting computers seem to predict enemy movements before they happen. How is this possible? Meanwhile, in the vast biochambers of the Hive homeworld, Queen Voice Kythera experienced something her species had not felt in centuries: genuine unease. The collective mind that connected billions of her people buzzed with worry as they accessed deeper memory files. The ancient memories were becoming clearer now. They spoke of adaptable warriors who learned faster than any species should be able to learn. These beings turned farming tools into weapons and defensive positions into launching points for attacks. They never fought the same way twice, always finding new solutions to old problems. "The old warnings were true," whispered one of the elder voices in her mind. "The humans have returned." Back in the Sol system, Admiral Jin Ho Lee stood in the command center of Terra Prima, humanity's newest orbital station. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship and defensive platform. His weathered face showed the stress of command as he coordinated humanity's response to their first contact disaster. "What's our current military strength?" he asked General Minna Choi, his chief military advisor. Minna was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire career studying military history and strategy. "We have 47 combat-ready vessels, mostly converted exploration ships. Our defensive platforms around Earth and Mars are operational, but they're not designed for large-scale warfare." Admiral Hyun Soo Nam, commander of the Terran Defense Fleet, added his own assessment. "Our ships performed better than expected in the first battle, but we can't rely on luck and improvisation forever. We need better weapons and more ships if we're going to survive what's coming." Dr. Jiwon Kang entered the command center carrying a data pad filled with her latest discoveries. As head of xenoarchaeology, she had been studying alien ruins found in Earth's asteroid belt. Her findings would change everything humanity thought they knew about themselves. "Admiral, you need to see this," she said, activating a holographic display. Ancient star maps appeared in the air, showing travel routes between thousands of star systems. "These ruins aren't from visiting aliens. They're from our own ancestors." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ji-won continued, her explanation, her voice growing more excited with each revelation. "Humanity isn't native to Earth. were descendants of an ancient spacefaring civilization that was scattered across the galaxy thousands of years ago. The other species didn't forget about us. They actively tried to erase us from history. Wu Jin, director of the Terran Intelligence Service, had been quietly investigating this possibility for months. His agents had intercepted alien communications and found evidence of a massive cover-up. The three galactic superpowers have been suppressing evidence of human origins for millennia. They treated Earth as a quarantine zone for a species they hoped would never redevelop space travel. Admiral Lee absorbed this information with the calm of an experienced leader. So they've been watching us all along, making sure we stayed isolated. But why? What made them so afraid of humanity that they had to hide our existence? The answer came from an unexpected source. The quantum communication array suddenly activated, receiving a transmission from the Vorthak Empire. Fleet Admiral Gorthak's image appeared on the main screen. His stone-like features twisted with a mixture of fear and rage. "Humans of the Sol System," he began. "I am Fleet Admiral Gorthak of the Vorthak Empire. Your unprovoked attack on our patrol has been noted. However, we are prepared to overlook this incident if you agree to certain terms." The terms were simple. Humanity would restrict itself to their home system, accept Vorthak oversight of all technological development, and provide tribute in the form of raw materials and scientific knowledge. In return, they would be allowed to continue existing as a client species under Vorthak protection. Admiral Lee's response was immediate and decisive. "Thank you for your generous offer, Fleet Admiral Gorthak. Our answer is no." He gestured to his communications officer to cut the transmission, then turned to address his staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that the galaxy wants to treat us as a threat whether we act like one or not. Since that's the case, I suggest we give them something to actually worry about." Over the following weeks, humanity's response took shape with frightening efficiency. Captain Daehyun Kim's damaged fleet had limped home with detailed intelligence about alien technology and tactics. Chief Engineer Taemin Yu worked around the clock to upgrade human ships with lessons learned from the first battle. Dr. So-young Han, now promoted to Director of Xenolinguistics, coordinated efforts to break alien communication codes. Her team had discovered that the three galactic superpowers had been suppressing dozens of smaller species, keeping them as client states or outright slaves. "We're not alone," she reported to Admiral Lee. "There are hundreds of species out there who hate their current situation. If we can contact them and offer an alternative." The plan that emerged was audacious in its scope. Rather than simply defending Earth, humanity would reach out to every oppressed species in the galaxy. They would offer something that had never existed on a galactic scale: true freedom and equality between species. The first test came when a Thraxian merchant ship arrived at the edge of the Sol system, badly damaged and requesting sanctuary. The Thraxians were a reptilian species that had been enslaved by the Vorthak for 3 centuries. Their representative, a scarred warrior named Captain Threx, met with human officials on Terra Prima. "We heard rumors that a new species had defeated a Vorthak patrol," he said through a translation device. "We had to see if it was true. Our people have been waiting generations for someone to stand up to the empires." Admiral Lee made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. "Captain Threx, we'd like to offer your people something the Vorthak never could: a choice. Join us as equals, and together we'll show the galaxy what freedom looks like." Within days, the Thraxian underground resistance was coordinating with human military advisors. Their centuries of forced labor in quantum mines had given them extensive knowledge of underground tunnel systems, which human engineers helped them turn into impregnable fortress networks. Similar contacts were made with other oppressed species. The Zephyrians, who had been forced to serve as pilots for Quillari merchant fleets, brought their expert knowledge of galactic navigation routes. The Chthonians, former subjects of the Hive Collective, shared intelligence about bioship technology and hive mind communication systems. As news of humanity's liberation campaign spread across the galaxy, the three superpowers finally began to take the threat seriously. Emergency sessions were called, fleets were mobilized, and ancient weapons were brought out of storage. But for the first time in thousands of years, the oppressed species of the galaxy had something they had never possessed before: hope. And at the center of that hope stood humanity. the mythical species that had returned from legend to remind the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for. Admiral Lee stood on the observation deck of Terra Prima, looking out at the growing fleet of human and alien ships gathering around Earth. "General Choi," he said to his military advisor, "how long do you think we have before they come for us?" Mina Choi consulted her intelligence reports. "Our sources suggest the three powers are still arguing among themselves about how to respond, but once they reach an agreement, I'd say we have maybe 6 months to prepare." "Then we'd better make them count," Lee replied. "Because when they arrive, they're going to discover that humans learned something during our isolation. We learned how to turn every challenge into an opportunity, every setback into a comeback. And most importantly, we learned that the best way to defend freedom is to share it." The galaxy was about to discover why some myths refused to stay buried. The rebellion began on Kalos Prime at exactly midnight local time. Deep beneath the planet's surface in the quantum mining tunnels that had been carved by 3 centuries of Thraxian slave labor, Resistance leader Kyung-Soo Park gave the signal that would change the galaxy forever. Kyung-Soo was different from the other resistance fighters. His grandmother had been human, one of the few survivors from the early exploration missions that the galactic powers had tried so hard to erase from history. The Vorthak had captured her ship decades ago, but instead of killing her, they had used her for breeding experiments. They wanted to understand what made humans so adaptable. Those experiments had created something they never expected, a hybrid who combined human creativity with Thraxian strength and knowledge of the mining tunnels. Now, as Kyung-Soo led his people in their fight for freedom, the Vorthak were learning the terrible cost of their cruelty. "All teams begin Phase 1, he whispered into his communication device. His voice carried the soft accent of someone who had learned human languages from his grandmother's stories. Across the planet, Thraxian workers who had spent their lives digging tunnels for their alien masters suddenly turned those same tunnels into weapons. Human military advisors had taught them guerrilla tactics that transformed their underground prison into an impregnable fortress network. The Vorthak garrison, trained to fight space battles, found themselves helpless against enemies who could appear from any wall, strike quickly, and disappear back into the darkness. Commander Vexus, the Vorthak officer in charge of Kalos Prime, sent increasingly desperate messages to his superiors. "The slaves have gone insane. They're using the mining tunnels like a weapon. We can't track them, we can't corner them, and every time we send troops underground, they don't come back." Meanwhile, in the Arcturus system, Captain Seo Jun Yang was leading the most dangerous rescue mission in human history. Arcturus Station was a Quillari research facility where the crystal beings conducted experiments on captured members of other species. The official purpose was to study different forms of intelligence, but the reality was far more sinister. Seo Jun's strike team consisted of 12 volunteers, each one an expert in a different form of combat or infiltration. They had spent weeks studying the station's layout and security systems, looking for weaknesses in the Quillari's seemingly perfect defenses. "Remember, we're not here to fight," Seo Jun whispered to his team as their stealth ship approached the station. "We're here to save lives. Get in, free the prisoners, and get out before they know we're there." But the mission went wrong from the first moment. The Quillari had been expecting trouble ever since the news of human military capabilities had spread through the galaxy. Their security systems were more advanced than human intelligence had predicted, and the strike team was detected within minutes of boarding the station. What followed was a running battle through the corridors of Arcturus Station. The Quillari, defenders, fought with energy weapons and force fields, while the humans used their adaptability to turn the station itself against its owners. They rerouted power conduits to overload security doors, used the station's artificial gravity to confuse their enemies, and converted maintenance tools into improvised weapons. In the deepest levels of the station, Seo Jun found something that made his blood run cold. Thousands of prisoners were being held in experimental chambers, subjected to procedures designed to break their minds and bodies. Many were barely alive, kept conscious only so the Quillari could study their reactions to pain and fear. Among the prisoners was Na Young Lim, a human scientist who had been captured during one of the early exploration missions. She had been held for months, subjected to experiments designed to understand human psychology and creativity. But instead of breaking her, the experience had made her more determined than ever to see her captors defeated. "Are you really human?" she whispered when Seo-jun found her cell. Her voice was weak, but her eyes burned with the fire of someone who had survived the unthinkable. "We're all human," Seo-jun replied as he worked to free her from the restraints. "And we're here to take you home." The rescue operation saved over 3,000 prisoners from dozens of different species. But more importantly, Na Young's intelligence about Quillari technology and methods would prove invaluable in the battles to come. She had spent months studying their systems from the inside, learning their weaknesses and blind spots. The most unexpected rebellion occurred in the heart of the Hive Collective itself. For the first time in their species' recorded history, individual Hive drones began to act independently of the collective mind. The cause was Commander Dong-hyun, a human intelligence officer who had discovered something shocking about the Hive's mental control systems. "They're not a natural hive mind," he reported to his superiors through an encrypted communication link. "The Queen Voice has been using technology to suppress the individual consciousness of her subjects. But the suppression isn't perfect. Some of them are breaking free." Working with liberated Hive drones who had retained their individual thoughts, Dong-hyun coordinated a campaign of psychological warfare that struck at the very foundation of the collective. They broadcast messages of individual identity and free will directly into the Hive communication network, causing chaos as millions of drones suddenly remembered what it felt like to think for themselves. Queen Voice Kithara experienced something she had never felt before: panic. The collective mind that had been her source of power for centuries was fracturing, splitting into millions of separate voices that refused to be controlled. For the first time since her species had evolved, she was truly alone in her own head. But the event that galvanized humanity and turned the conflict from a diplomatic crisis into a holy war was the massacre of the New Horizon. The transport ship was carrying civilian colonists to establish humanity's first settlement outside the Sol system. Families, children, scientists and artists, people whose only crime was wanting to build a new life among the stars. High Commander Zelthris had decided to make an example of them. His fleet intercepted the transport ship and destroyed it without warning, broadcasting the attack across all galactic communication channels. In his mind, this show of force would demonstrate Vorthak power and convince other species not to support the human rebellion. Instead, it had the opposite effect. War correspondent Yejin Kim had been aboard a nearby human warship when the attack occurred. Her broadcast of the massacre, complete with footage of families being vaporized while they begged for mercy, was transmitted across human networks and beyond. The images of children's toys floating in the wreckage became a rallying cry that united humanity like nothing before. The response was swift and devastating. Dr. Chung Min-an, humanity's leading weapons engineer, had been working on something called the Prometheus Protocol, a way to turn humanity's technological disadvantage into their greatest strength. Since humans lacked the advanced technology of their enemies, they instead created adaptive systems that learned and evolved during combat. "If they want to see what humans are capable of when we're truly angry," Changmin said as he put the finishing touches on his designs, "then let's show them." The new human ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They literally grew stronger as battles progressed, incorporating enemy technology and adapting to new threats in real time. A human vessel that began a fight with basic weapons could end it equipped with systems more advanced than anything the enemy possessed. The first test of the Prometheus Protocol came when a Vorthak battle group tried to retake Kalos Prime. Human ships that met them seemed small and insignificant compared to the massive alien dreadnoughts. But as the battle progressed, the Vorthak watched in horror as the enemy vessels began to change. Human ships absorbed energy from alien weapons and converted it into power for their own systems. They analyzed enemy tactics and developed counters faster than living beings should have been able to think. Most terrifying of all, they seemed to learn from every mistake, never falling for the same trick twice. By the end of the battle, the Vorthak fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind wreckage that the human ships immediately began to salvage and incorporate into their own designs. The adaptation process that had taken humanity thousands of years on Earth was now happening in hours during combat. News of these victories spread throughout the galaxy faster than the superpowers could contain it. Species that had lived under alien domination for centuries began to believe that change was possible. Rebellion broke out on hundreds of worlds as the oppressed finally saw a chance for freedom. The three galactic superpowers called an emergency session of the Galactic Council, but for the first time in millennia, they could not reach consensus on how to respond. The Vorthak wanted to launch a full-scale extermination campaign against humanity and their allies. The Quillari preferred a more calculated approach, using their superior technology to contain the rebellion. The Hive Collective was too busy dealing with internal chaos to contribute much to the discussion. This hesitation gave humanity exactly what they needed: time to prepare for the inevitable final confrontation. Admiral Jin Ho Lee stood in the I command center of Terra Prima, now expanded into a massive orbital. The morning of the final battle, Admiral Jin Ho Lee stood on the bridge of the Terra Invicta, watching as the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled formed up around him. 300 ships stretched across space in perfect formation, but these were not just human vessels. The sight filled him with pride and determination. Thraxian tunnel ships moved like shadows between the larger vessels, their hulls designed to phase through solid matter. Liberated Hive bioships pulsed with living energy, their organic hulls able to repair damage in real time. Dozens of smaller species contributed their own unique vessels: Zephyrian scout ships with incredible speed, Chthonian research vessels converted into mobile laboratories, and many others. "All ships report ready for battle," announced Fleet Commander Sang Ho Im from his position at the tactical station. His weathered face showed the strain of coordinating such a massive force, but his voice remained steady and confident. "Enemy fleet detected on long-range sensors," reported the communications officer. "Admiral, you need to see this." The main screen activated, showing a view of deep space that made even experienced officers gasp in shock. The combined fleets of the three galactic superpowers filled the starfield like a swarm of angry insects. Thousands of ships moved in perfect formation, their combined firepower capable of destroying entire solar systems. High Commander Zelthris commanded the Vorthak portion of the fleet from his personal dreadnought, the World Breaker. The massive vessel was larger than some space stations, armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. Around it swarmed hundreds of smaller warships, each one bristling with plasma cannons and missile launchers. Prime Architect Morvain brought the Quillari's most advanced AI-controlled battle fleet. Her crystal ships moved with mathematical precision, their energy shields creating a defensive network that seemed impossible to penetrate. Their weapons fired beams of pure force that could cut through any known material. Queen Voice Kithara led what remained of the Hive Collective's bioships. Though many of her vessels had been lost to the internal rebellion, those that remained were among the most dangerous in the galaxy. They fought not with traditional weapons, but with viral attacks that could corrupt enemy systems and turn them against their own crews. "They outnumber us 7-1, observed General Minna Choi, who had come aboard the flagship for the final battle. "Our tactical computers are having trouble calculating odds of survival." Admiral Lee smiled grimly. "Then it's a good thing we're not fighting by their rules." He activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee. Today we face the largest enemy force in galactic history. They have superior numbers, superior weapons, and superior technology. But they lack the one thing that will decide this battle: the willingness to fight for something greater than themselves." Dr. Haewon Jung worked frantically at her station, trying to decode the quantum defense systems protecting the Nexus itself. The massive space station hung between the two fleets like a glittering prize, its ancient weapons capable of turning the tide of battle for whichever side controlled it. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the station," she reported. "They're preparing to activate defensive systems that haven't been used in thousands of years." The battle began when High Commander Zelthris lost patience with the standoff. His dreadnought's main weapons opened fire, sending streams of plasma energy racing across space toward the human fleet. Other ships followed his lead, and within moments the space between the two forces was filled with weapons fire. But the humans did not meet force with force. Instead, they did something that shocked every observer in the galaxy. They broadcast their entire battle plan across all communication networks. Fleet Commander Sang Ho-eum's tactical discussions, Admiral Lee's strategic orders, even their casualty reports were transmitted for everyone to hear. "Sir, our communications are being monitored by every species in the galaxy," warned the communications officer. "The enemy can hear everything we're saying." "I know," Admiral Lee replied calmly. "That's the point." What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The humans fought with complete transparency, allowing every oppressed species throughout the galaxy to see exactly how they operated. They showed that their victories came not from superior firepower or advanced technology, but from cooperation, adaptation, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. Captain Jimin Ryu led a boarding party toward the Nexus station while the space battle raged around them. Her team included Seongwoo Bae, a demolitions expert who could turn any environment into a tactical advantage, and In Young Kwan, a cyber warfare specialist who could make enemy systems fight against themselves. "Remember," Jimin told her team, as their assault transport raced toward the station, "we're not here to conquer, we're here to liberate. Every system we take, every corridor we clear, we're doing it for every species that has ever dreamed of freedom." The boarding action was fierce and desperate. The Nexus defenders fought with the fury of those who knew their ancient privileges were at stake. But the human boarding parties fought with something more powerful, the certainty that they were fighting for something worth dying for. Seongwoo Bae turned the station's own defensive systems against its guardians, using his knowledge of explosives to create chain reactions that cleared entire sections of defenders. In Young Kwan penetrated the station's computer networks not to destroy them, but to broadcast messages of hope to every oppressed world in the galaxy. As the battle raged in space and throughout the station, something unprecedented began to happen. On worlds throughout the galaxy, the oppressed species were watching the battle through the humans' open communications. They saw the price that humanity and their allies were paying for freedom, and they made their own choice. Rebellion erupted simultaneously on thousands of worlds. Forthak garrison commanders found their slave populations rising up at the exact moment their fleets were engaged in the distant battle. Quelari mining operations ground to a halt as workers seized control of the facilities. Even hive worlds saw individual drones breaking free of their mental shackles. The tide of battle turned when Admiral Lee made the most important decision of his life. As the enemy fleets closed in on the human formation, he could have ordered a fighting retreat. Instead, he did something that defined humanity's character. He moved his flagship directly between the enemy weapons and a group of damaged Allied vessels. "All human ships cover the wounded," he ordered. "No one gets left behind." The sight of human vessels sacrificing themselves to protect their allies was broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had known only domination and fear saw something they had never witnessed before. Beings who were willing to die for strangers, who valued the lives of their friends more than their own survival. High Commander Zelthris, watching from his dreadnought, felt something he had never experienced in his long military career: doubt. His people fought for conquest and glory, but these humans were fighting for ideals he barely understood. How do you defeat an enemy who considers victory less important than protecting their friends? The final moment came when the three alien commanders met Admiral Lee in the Nexus Council chamber. The space station had been taken by the boarding parties, but the battle in space continued to rage. Zelthris, Morvain, and Cathera demanded humanity's surrender, offering terms that would allow the human species to continue existing as a subject race. "You have fought well," admitted Prime Architect Morvain, her crystal body flickering with grudging respect. "But you cannot win. Our combined fleets still outnumber yours, and we have weapons you cannot match." Admiral Lee looked at each of them calmly. "You're right about our numbers, but you're wrong about something more important. We've already won." He gestured to the communication screens around them, which showed the rebellions erupting throughout the galaxy. Every species that has watched this battle has seen what we're really fighting for. Not conquest, not domination, but the simple right to be free. And that idea is more powerful than any weapon you possess. Queen Voice Cathara, her mind still reeling from the loss of her collective, spoke for the first time with her own individual voice. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Lee replied, surprising them all. "We don't want your surrender or your submission. We want you to join us in building something better. A galaxy where every species has the right to choose its own destiny." The offer was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of demanding the destruction of their enemies, the humans offered them a chance at redemption. They proposed a new form of government based on cooperation rather than domination, the Galactic Commonwealth. Over the following days, as the fighting gradually died down, the terms of the new order were negotiated. The three former superpowers would not be destroyed, but transformed. Their technological advantages would be shared freely, while their oppressive systems would be dismantled. The Vorthak Empire became the Vorthak Republic, with High Commander Zelthris eventually serving as an elected representative rather than a military dictator. The Quillari maintained their technological leadership but opened their knowledge to all species. The Hive Collective evolved into something unprecedented, a voluntary mental network where,